Story 1. The concept of spite. There are many species amongst the stars, separated by the vast eternal gulf between worlds. There are allies steadfast and enemies most foul. But there is one species that I long to fully understand. Let me tell you of the humans. It was long ago, when I was young, first learning my glyphs, in fact, and how to clutch a stylus and write my name, when the humans made contact with us. It was their first contact, and they showed such an exuberance that was almost unheard of. Their diplomats, artists, merchants, and journalists swarmed over our worlds, so excited to finally make contact with intelligent life. They wanted to know everything: our history, our culture, our biology. We treated them like one would treat a curious child. After all, they were so much smaller, and their accomplishments so much fewer than ours. We tolerated their presence, and they loved us for it. It would have remained this way were it not for the Kaleworth invasion. We were blindsided, unprepared for a war of this magnitude, unsure of why a species would simply throw away centuries of peace and prosperity, ignore every law and treaty the Panspecies coalition has created. But the humans rallied alongside us. Their weapons were crude, their ships were small, their soldiers stunted and scrawny, and yet they were prepared to die to help us, their brothers. We all know how the invasion went. The humans scavenged, stole, and adapted anything they could get a grip on. By the end of the war, their ships were as maneuverable as ours, as resilient as ours, and, I hate to admit it, outclassed us completely in firepower. But the humans never demanded tribute for their assistance. They split the crushed Kaleworth worlds evenly, smiling as they forced the scattered remnants to sign treaty after treaty, encouraging us to take whatever we could from them. There are few creatures in this universe more cunning and wily than a human diplomat. They have a way of making you feel as though you cheated them, while they dip their hands into your pockets and take all you hold dear. I did not truly make a human's acquaintanceship until some time later, after I had enlisted in the self-defense forces. I was assigned to assist a human platoon in a joint operation during the Badashi conflict, the humans finding our combat armatures to be a most excellent complement to their infantry formation during the guerrilla warfare on that blasted Fen world. It was there that I learned of the human mindset. Humans take to war like no other species I have encountered. They suffer the scars of battle the same as any, but they show an adaptability that is most remarkable. I have seen a human soldier stay up 16 standard units, staring ahead, unblinking and vigilant. I have seen a human watch his brother die and still remain fighting. I have seen a human swinging his utility knife towards the gullet of a badass stormtrooper, even as it bared down upon him and commanded him to lay down his arms. But there is one moment I remember most clearly. One human I had become close to, by the name of Josiah, was injured during a heavy firefight in the muck fields. The badass were bearing down on our position, and Josiah was nearly dead. We could extract him, but he would live the rest of his life a cripple, and it would drastically reduce our chances of escape. Josiah motioned for us to retreat, struggling against me when I attempted to scoop him up and carry him. "Go on, you stalk-eyed fuck," he shouted at me, "you'll be fine." The rest of his platoon nodded and dragged me away, despite my protest. I heard the badass burst through the tree line as we retreated deep into cover, and I heard Josiah give a choking gasp. Josiah detonated his full complement of explosives as the badass were upon him, wiping out their entire force and turning the muck fields into a dried pit of ash. Later, I asked one of our comrades, Conrad, why he did that. The badass would have allowed him surrender, would given him medical treatment. Conrad gave a sneer and nodded. Josiah did it to spite those slimy badass Azramers. It took me some time to understand this concept of spite. To humans, it is a desire, a will to harm, annoy, or otherwise inconvenience a foe by any means necessary, even at harm to themselves. And as the Badashi conflict continued, I saw more example of this spite as the humans burned their colonies and scuttled their ships just to deny the badass use of them. And that is why I hold a bit of fear for our tiny friends. A species who is so determined not to win, but to cause his enemy harm, that he is willing to destroy what he holds most dear. It is a strange concept, and yet, they thrive. The galaxy holds many wonders, and I am proud to have met one of them. Story 2. To Waken a Sleeping Giant. Our species has always been considered a nuisance amongst the stars. We weren't expert fighters, we weren't brilliant scientists, we were traders. We would trade anything and everything. The art of deal-making and breaking is something we had refined over thousands of years. The concept of giving your word was foreign to us. You couldn't eat it, you couldn't hold it, you couldn't wear it as a hat. What good was it? It was too late we realized the importance the other races put into this concept. But it was too late, the damage was done, we were considered liars and cheats. Barely accepted into the core systems and always treated with suspicion or outright malice. Finding the humans was a boon for our species. They were relatively low technology-wise, but they had discovered how to split the atom. Our technology is considered at least 100 years out of date by galactic standards, but to the humans it was a marvel. They gave up large masses of their natural resources in exchange for out-of-date star charts and old phase drives. They spread at a rate that was staggering. They had established a large colony on their fourth planet and fledgling colonies on several of the more hospitable moons throughout their system. It was a golden age for both our people, a time of unparalleled cooperation. The humans were nearly as deceptive as we were. They were our greatest allies and our worthiest foes in the art of negotiation and trade. Then the wars began. An insectoid species known as the Nutari came to the conclusion that there was finite space and inevitably conflict would arise over the colonizable worlds. They struck first. The core worlds went to war. Inevitably the other insectoid species sided with the Nutari, whose mentality was one of total annihilation. They did not require colonies immediately, so a planet could be scourged of life and given hundreds of years to recover. Whole species were wiped out, billions died. Our worlds and the humans' fledgling empire was insulated from this violence. Neither of us had participated in the wars, and the core worlds had no interest in us or our pets. Degrees the core worlds defeated the insectoids and drove them to extinction. The Weepenthanes of Dermot were absolutely essential to the core world's victory over the insectoids, thus they were gifted with new territory, since much of theirs had been lost to the ecosystem-killing attacks of the insectoids. This territory, much to our chagrin, was worlds we had colonized, albeit they were not territory we technically owned, but we and the humans share a saying, that possession was 9/10 of the law. The Weepenthanes gave us a year to evacuate our colonies. This was not nearly enough time for the billions of residents. We appealed to the council, but were denied even an audience. They viewed us as squatters and did not look favorably over the fact that we had not assisted them in the wars, but no request for aid had ever been asked. After a year had passed, the Weepenthanes struck, thousands died. We had no way of matching their prowess or weaponry. The humans offered to aid us in defending our worlds, and naturally we accepted. We had no idea what horror we would be unleashing. We had never paid attention to the humans' history, though it was readily available to us. It wasn't something we were interested in. They had been warring with one another throughout their recorded history. Their earliest tales spoke of battle and bloodshed. It was shocking to read of some of their major conflicts, the terrible things they inflicted against one another. But we were desperate, and the humans offered some kind of salvation. We armed them with not only weapons but also knowledge. We had never been so foolish as to provide the humans with information on advanced weaponry. It was a bargaining chip we always held away from them. The humans had always been brilliant when it came to adapting and improving existing technology. With weaponry it was like nothing we had seen. They took our technology in directions we had never dreamed. In months they had advanced our weaponry further than we had in 30 years. Their initial attacks against the Weepenthanes were staggering. They committed thousands of their own people and millions of credits in what they called probing attacks, merely to see what the response would be. This taught humanity one thing: they were still greatly outclassed technologically. It took 10 of their heavy cruisers to destroy a single Weepenthane capital ship. The humans had a simple solution: they sent 20. Every human world in their empire became devoted to helping the war effort. Their first true offensive was massive: thousands of ships, millions of troops, billions of credits. It shattered like glass against a Weepenthane's armada. We begged the humans to stop, that we couldn't bear to see what they were doing to their people to assist a race that was not their own. They refused. They would not let us, who had never given the humans a fair deal in our entire history, who had wrung every tiny niggling concession out of them for technology that was woefully out of date, lose what was ours. The rest of the war went much like the first battle. Humans were defeated time and time again. They never succeeding in halting the Weapenthanes' advance or pushing them off a single world. After 10 years of war, the Weapenthanes of Dermot surrendered. For the first time in 400 years they admitted defeat. We were baffled. Until the humans explained the concept of a Pyrrhic victory to us. It was an idea so insane, so utterly shockingly mad, that we were terrified. Our own allies had become more terrifying than the enemy they had just defeated. With everything they experienced and suffered at the hands of the Weapenthanes, we expected genocide on an unprecedented level. Again, the humans shocked us. They made their hated enemy a protectorate in exchange for some of the humans' own colony worlds. The Weapenthanes, the technology and knowledge was used to push humanity far beyond us. This was shared freely with us. They submitted a motion for us to join the council and rammed it down the core world's throats. Who would oppose them? They had defeated the most effective military in the known galaxy and were still on a war footing. What was most shocking was how easily they reverted back to the simple explorers we knew them as. They returned to their homes, beat their swords into plowshares, and, with their new technology, continued to explore the galaxy. Now they serve as a warning to the rest of the galaxy, an unspoken threat to what will occur if they were to waken a sleeping giant and fill him with a terrible resolve. Rex Delphin, 4th to Ambassador to the Sol System. Story 3. Conflict breeds creativity. I posted about a week ago about a story I wrote and lit, and they pointed me to here to post this. It's an edit of a short story I wrote, and all I ask is for a critique on what I could do better or what I've fucked up on. So please, hold nothing back if this isn't to your liking. Humans. This species is short, creative, stubborn, decently intelligent, and individually are weak, yet in numbers are incredibly hardy, robust, and strong. They breed quickly, live short and futile lives, and for the smallest of reasons will kill each other without a second thought. Many have had low expectations of this brutish and barbarous species. They were beneath us more than any other race in terms of culture, art, technology, and social programs. So, while their least desirables were worked hard and rewarded little, their aristocratic counterparts flocked to the heavens, eager to join the thriving extrastellar community. Naive to the structure of galactic politics, the Terrans would push themselves onto whatever race would lend counsel to their primitive auditory communications. Many left them to their own devices, shamelessly and rightfully leaving them to the harsh realities of the spacious home we all find ourselves in. We Centauri, however, were one of the handfuls of groups that would barter and negotiate agreements with the vermin. We'd trade scraps, derelict and tattered starships, agricultural equipment, and even environmental stabilizing technology to them. The barbarians had done more damage to their home planet than any other in the recorded history of intelligent species, for resources worth many hundred times more than what they were worth. Far be it from us to take advantage of a prime workforce for our resource collection. We did so with a slight amount of smug enthusiasm and deception, pretending to be allies yet giving them the worst treatment in regards to trade agreements and our gifts of knowledge. The true irony of it all being that they willfully accepted these downsides under the pretense of furthering intergalactic diplomacy and with promise of showing others that they were willing, able, and trustworthy. I suppose to this end, the humans had formed a special bond with our insectoid race. We were advancing their civilization at least 100 of their puny years forward, while reaping almost every possible benefit we never deserved. Little did we understand the error of what we had unwittingly done. In retrospect, we had broken the cardinal rule of the galactic community without proper diligence, disregard for foresight, and without consulting the Galactic Council. We planted a seed of unrivaled growth in a yet unproven and undeserving race for our own benefit. Their bipedal skeletons with their undeveloped brains relentlessly honed in and trained themselves to grasp the underlying concepts of the machinery and electronics they acquired far faster than any one particular group had ever thought possible. Foregoing the advantages of biological engineering offered to them, they preferred to keep to their fleshy forms for the sake of preserving humanity. This was a line of logic that still confounds most everyone to this day, would prove invaluable and supremely effective to them. Their primitive minds would conjure outlandish and ridiculous notions of the fine fabric of reality that our enhanced nervous systems would outright deny for the sake of simple logic. All soon learned that the human brain, for all of its faults and inefficiencies, was a marvel of creativity of the greatest caliber. Their stubborn nature defied every law of the universe, always amassing new theories to test, more experiments to perform. Never allowing no to dissuade them, they'd work a problem from every possible angle in ways which seemed like pure folly. The most damning thing of all being that sometimes they'd be right and completely shake the foundation of their scientific collaboration. This was the true nature of humanity. To stop at nothing once they had set their collective mind to a task, to either prove it true or deny it as a falsehood. In the breadth of 2 short Terran lifetimes, they had mastered the art of manipulating what they called dark energy, which we know as the cosmological repulsive law. 50 years later, they had traveled as far as the innermost galactic core, to be noted. A suicidal trek that only the desperate would engage in. 10 years after that, they began to mass-produce antimatter on an unparalleled scale. Ocular spiracles turned. Attention drifted from the inane squabbles of their own to the insane human populace as they exploded instead of trickled from their solar system to neighboring stars. They stripped every unclaimed world they touched of whatever the solar atmosphere would allow to them, only to further accelerate their growth that would rival the great empires that now are long gone. From this, the Galactic Council became unnerved. The Terrans spreading across their own backyard, they expediently started to make headway into the secrets of the universe that, as of yet in this entry, few others have breached. Due to our friendship of centuries gone by, the humans have had nothing but a peaceful, amicable, and symbiotic relationship with us, the orchestrators of their advance. They would begin to catch up to our own level of technology and understanding, yet untempered by the wisdom of age and experience. With exponential growth, they'd overtake us in almost all things. In recognition and gratitude of our dealings with each other, they shared their advances with us, and us Centauri would happily share what we could without question. We had become one of the most intertwined and mutually beneficial allies of the entire galaxy. To be sure, the Council saw all of this as nothing but heretical. They dominated the galaxy, they had every other race under their thumb, as the humans would say. To advance beyond what they deemed appropriate was nothing short of chastising a god in the minds of other species. In the past, they had sent probes to the Terran homeworld called Earth, attempting to dissuade them from advancing too quickly. The Council, in their vast superiority to any other, never allowed technological advancement of any species beyond what they were comfortable with. They had the power and means to enforce these rules to any and all in the core worlds, and wouldn't lightly give it up. They offered admittance to the alliance the Council controlled, but as such, they would need to adhere to many laws that stunned quick growth and only sign off on research on what they would allow. In return, trade lanes would be opened up to Sol and her watery rock, they would gain a seat on the Council and would be defended from whatever plight may come to them. They even brought schematics for a neural implant that would allow the humans total access to logical ways of thinking, bringing everlasting peace to their kind. The only downside was they'd have to put aside creativity in favor of being taken care of. Humanity saw this for what it truly was. It is the same reason we denied the Council as well. It was an insidious mean of control. They would have none of it and destroyed the probe that sent this message as a final fuck you to the galaxy. Through fear and just a hint of jealousy at their willingness to deny the Council, our 2 species would soon become scorned, the community of the Milky Way lashing out against us for bringing such an unknown variable unto them all, and by proxy the Council. Due to the Terrans living on the very fringe of the galaxy, outside the arm of influence of the Council, many of our worlds and star systems were raised to but bitter molten metal. Billions of us Centauri late exterminated for a crime we committed in swift and brutal sieges. Over a century, we retreated behind the lines of the humans. This is when their virtues of acceptance of those, not of Earth, finally became one of their most endearing qualities that we Centauri would never forget. This is when we embraced the humans as much as they had for us. As hard as it was for us to leave our home, they did their absolute most to find and terraform planets for us to settle on. Looking back, we actually did so little for them that it is disgraceful to us. In our graciousness, we worked as hard as we could for them. Still, they would never allow our kind to feel such inadequacies. When our exoskeletons started to buckle, they would find us non-physical labor. When our nerve bundles became overwhelmed with our duty, they would force us to take it easy and rest. Many who would read this would think that we had been forced to work, that in return for asylum in their territory, we'd break our appendages toiling for them. Nothing could be further from the truth. We, as a species, were so honored by their acceptance and open arms that we felt indebted to quite literally work ourselves to termination for such unabashed camaraderie. Terrans, however, would surprise us yet again by allowing us to rebuild our society, with New Zenithics being only 7 light-years away from Earth. Their territory was our territory, their homes were our homes. During these times, they knew a force to be reckoned with would be coming. Preparedness became paramount. War was inevitable, and their distance from the outer core worlds gave them the time they needed. Breeding increased with incredible speed, mining of entire star systems became the norm. Construction of Dreadnought-class starships began with the newest weapons brought to bear. The Terrans then took the brunt of the force as the Council's forces advanced. Nearly 1/4 of their outer colonies laid waste in an effort to quell their expansion. We did what we could, given the vast resources the Terrans allotted to us. Working side by side, our now small numbers labored until our carapaces would no longer allow, or until we were forced to stop. Before this log continues, I should note a particular unnamed humanities scholar who once quoted, "Conflict breeds creativity." Creativity, as a human construct, was its defining characteristic millennia before their journey to the stars, yet would prove most valuable now more than ever for them and ourselves. Within 15 years of the first galactic armada advance into their territory, their population exploded nearly threefold when their political structure began Terran and Centauri propaganda. Within another 10 years, the now 8.4 trillion humans had finished constructing fleets of unrivaled scale and destructive power. Their speed of breeding, construction, harvesting, and innovation became that of legend. Over the next 50 years, they held their ground, training every new combatant with the skills necessary to operate every basic facet of a starship. With us Centauri being trained and taught alongside them. Again, they'd be at the forefront our own advance. The Terrans never let up, and never let us fall behind in terms of education and brotherhood. Obliterating every last ship that dared to face them, they then sent a second and a third wave of ships to reinforce the line. Over the next single short year, they breached the front lines of the Armada. Their natural chemically enhanced minds from adrenaline during battle would serve them well enough to laugh in the face of death and not even feel a mortal wound from combat. From there, 100 years later, they had pushed into the heart of the Council's core worlds. Over the next 200 years, they would either conquer, obliterate, or force a surrender of any species that stood in their way, while chartering peace treaties with those who had stayed out of the war and putting the Centauri at the highest echelons of non-Terran politics. The ban on research was abolished, and a new age of enlightenment and technological might exploded throughout the galaxy. We had done comparatively nothing for them. We never served their interests until they were beyond us. We gave them the worst of trade deals in the early years. And we thought nothing of them besides mere apes. Their own ingenuity would have brought all of this to the same end regardless of our intervention. Now, while the Milky Way stands as a united and prosperous whole, dominated by the lowly humans, we have only a single thing to say: Terrans are beyond horrifying, but are the best of allies. Woe be to any who stands against them. Carnidigal, first in the order of the historical records. Story 4, A Box of Crayons. It was during one of the first major expeditions that it happened. A colony ship was en route to a nice juicy Earth-type world that a probe had located to much fanfare. A ship was rush-built, a crew selected, a lottery held to see who would get to go start a new life on another world. Wouldn't you know it, we get there just in time to meet a fat alien ship headed in from the opposite direction. It was tense, let me tell you. Something about the structure of their language made it impossible to translate. Oh, we managed to adapt our systems and open communications. We found we could share universal concepts like mathematics, but anything more complex, something like we found at first, was right out. We didn't have the supplies to survive turning around and weren't confident we could take them in a fight if it came to that, and everyone agreed they were probably in the same situation. We were in a standoff. All the military and government sorts were throwing fits to spite, you know, the whole first contact situation, a milestone in the history of the entire freaking species. Some of the transmissions we got over the comms gave us the impression there were similar sorts on board the other ship. Can you even get impressions from the sight of a bunch of giant blue worms crowding around a big green worm and poking him with tentacles until they got slapped away? We were pretty much stuck. Things were getting worse and worse as our ships came closer together, and we had to settle into a proper orbit before our limited maneuvering fuel gave out. Goddamn lowest contractor bid, that's when the navigator's son wandered onto the bridge. And he brought crayons. Well, the worms stopped squirming when everyone else was too busy to notice a 5-year-old carrying a picture for his dad. A few seconds later, a worm came into view with a brush, and the captain worm worked up a picture of the world we were both approaching. Linguists would later point out that the aliens have some kind of complex pictograph-based language. Didn't make it any less funny when the artistically challenged captain resolved the situation with a kid's box of crayons. In the end, we drew up, a plan to divvy territory between us and notify each other in case of potential trouble. It's worked out all right for the past few years. The government isn't happy with sharing the world, the scientists and philosophers are overjoyed, and the rest don't care, as long as they don't eat our brains. And if anything does happen, well, there's a good reason why all officials and officers are required by regulation to carry a pack of crayons at all times. Story 5, The Other. Every race is a perfectly unified body cliché. I can't sleep at night. It began after the Earthlings appeared on the galactic stage. I was one of the many individuals who began to research them, some as a job, others out of curiosity. While the human beings were certainly unique in physiology, ability, and culture, so was every other species. Nothing about them at first glance made them stand out from the galactic crowd. In fact, in a general sense, the species of the galaxy were all very similar. After all, we all had to conquer our home planets and develop the ability for space travel on our own. I suppose if anything did, it wasn't any one attribute but the combinations. They not only had a wide variety of coloration, they also had a wide variety of size and body type. In fact, if anything, that was what made Earthlings stand out. They had variety. Not only physically, but culturally. It wasn't completely unheard of for a species to have more than one language, but these were almost always glorified dialects and/or remnants of pre-artificial language, if that species used one. The humans had 24 FAMILIES degrees of spoken language. Granted, they did have a single lingua francas, but still. All these differences, and I have listed only 2 of many, lead straight into what may be the most interesting thing about humans: their propensity for violent conflict. Let me rephrase that. It's not that there weren't other violent species out there. In fact, many if not most of the spacefaring races were apex predators on their home planets. It's humans had a habit of infighting. Nobody could believe how often and how ruthlessly humans would fight with themselves. When one of my contemporaries asked them directly, they responded with some human philosopher. Most of it basically boiled down to the concept of the other. It was almost insulting. As if we had no idea what war was. As if one species had never set out to destroy another of incompatibility. Maybe I misspoke earlier. It isn't even as if no other species has gone to war with its own race. It was the major reason why maintaining close relationships with colonies was so important to many species. If colonies became too separate and independent for a couple of generations, conflicts could arise and had. Our problem wasn't that they went to war with other members of their own species. It was how quickly they were able to view their own species as the other. Maybe that was the defining trait of humans? Their ability to quickly label anyone as the other? As a non-person? Some of their philosophers certainly thought so. Many of my contemporaries stopped their search here. I began to dive back into the history of Earth. I wanted to know how such an ability had come about. My search revealed many disturbing things. Atrocities of such a varied and incomprehensible nature. Attempted genocide, torture, slavery. No one did these things to their own species. Soon I was the only one left. All of my fellow researchers, public and private, had since gone public with their findings. Humanity was painted in an ill light. Their defining trait to be the ability to treat another being as equals one day and as an inanimate obstacle the next. I realized that my fellow scholars had forgotten something. The first thing that had shocked us. The diversity of humankind. As I delved back into their history, I saw more evidence of how those differences were even more pronounced than we thought. It was no wonder they were able to consider members of their own species as non-persons. But how did such an arrangement come to exist? Why hadn't any one culture or civilization already stamped out their rivals? And why did no other species have this diversity? I eventually came upon prehistory. I read about how early man had driven his rival and sister species to extinction. My first thoughts were that the others were right. Then it occurred to me. No other species had closely related species either. No other species was as diverse in form and culture. As the realization set in, I grew terrified. I began this research commenting on how similar the species of the galaxy were. Humans were similar to us as well. No other species had the diversity in value systems and beliefs the humans did. What sets the humans apart is not their capacity to turn friends and loved ones into the other. It is their capacity to turn the other into friends and loved ones. What is truly surprising is not that the humans fight over their differences. It's that they have differences to fight over. The species of the galaxy are all very similar. With one exception, they have all brutally stamped out any differences, any variations. These deviations from the norm were destroyed so perfectly our racial memories have forgotten them. Every species, save Homo sapiens, had long ago perfected the art of genocide. I wonder if I shall ever sleep again. Story 6: Ever-Changing Streams of Info. We found them in a backwater of a planet. Surrounded by a nearly impenetrable cloud of media satellites ricocheting data from the surface to the skies and back. The trail that led us to them, a ghostly cacophony of information broadcasted uninterrupted since several generations ago. Growing more and more complex by each light year, we got closer to them until not even us were able to take it. For 10 orbits of their planet around their single star we observed, we studied them, we tried to make sense of their culture and their habits. All in vain. Human toddlers were exposed since young to what other species of the universe considered psychological warfare, torture even. An endless and ever-changing stream of info. New art forms. New opinions. New celebrities, over and over again. And they absorbed it all to the point of obsession. Such quirky creatures, we thought. Our songs were as old as the mountains and equally as powerful. Our rites and traditions time-proof. Unchanged over the millennia. We established contact with this curious race step by step over the span of another 10 orbits around their star. We had to admit it was both funny and a little bit flattering when we discovered that humans started wearing clothes quite inspired by our uniforms and technical suits. Then they started to change little things. The color. The materials. They added patterns and decided which complements would suit it better. The most popular one, a light scarf that apparently would contrast with the mineral plates. Not one of their months later. One warrior of our expedition came into the decision chamber wearing one of those modified uniforms, as if there were nothing strange with it. She was the first, but not the last. Soon philosophers and metal nurses started to imitate the humans, picking up some of their slang and mannerisms, and when the humans grew bored with something, so did those members of our expedition for fear of being seen as uncultured and out of the loop in the numerous human parties we were invited to attend. When the acclimatization period was over, we opened the stars for the humans, introducing them to a whole galaxy of stagnant cultures and pragmatic species that received this strange race with little interest. They had warriors like us, but their weapons and tactics were too primitive to make them a realistic menace. They had philosophers like us, but other races surpassed their intellectual capacity in ways they weren't even able to understand yet. But humanity did the same thing they did when we first contacted. They learned. They emulated and then they modified. Meme. Virality. Trend. Words for concepts until then alien to us. Humans looked upon the cultures of dozens of species and absorbed them, earning the sympathy of even the most traditionalist members of the Alliance. They gave new voices to old legends and shared them across the galaxy. One year humans appreciated the echo poetry of the Mayan people, the next one most of them would dress just like the ice farmers of the Ezer Collective. And then humans started to improve, to experiment, to upgrade, because humanity had gazed upon the traditions and artistic expressions of older and more powerful races, grew bored and found them wanting. And the entire galaxy followed suit. In only one generation. Our cubs now look for humans to tell them what's popular, which artists are relevant and what clothing style is currently acceptable to wear. The Marilon Queens contract humans to design new color patterns for their translucid wings, and no sane Alliance senator travels without a human counselor to keep her up to date with the current trends. Earth has turned into the galaxy cultural powerhouse and made acceptable things not even considered before by some of the other races. Humans are now our celebrities, our artists and forward thinkers. Some of them living in other planets have their every movement and activity analyzed and turned into a trend by the local population. Eager to be as interesting as that human apparently is. Humanity has changed us, made us something else. They are unifying us, but also making us forget who we were and what we believed in. We're slowly being turned into human and I don't know what we can do about it. I was there during our first contact. Me and the members of the expedition have been exposed to humans longer than most. That warrior with the new uniform never returned to our moon home. Instead she chose to stay in Earth and live with a female human. One of our philosophers is now a renowned writer, famous across the stars. And me? Well, I'm writing this in human language, am I not? Feger. Son of Kreza. Son of Awaz. Son of Draw War Leader and Sigma Explorer. Story 7. Expectations of the Ape. Life is a curious thing. Born by mistake. With the mixing of protozoic slimes. And the fusing of proteins and acids. In the beginning all was blackness. I do not remember my birth. Only the warmth of the womb of stars and the nausea of my spiraling emergence into a nightmarish dream. I was drowning in cold water. Though always my core smoldered and burned beneath the cloak of my flesh. Stone and water and sky surrounded as I was by the blackness of void. I dared not reach out. How could I? The weight of the universe was about me. So I turned inwards. At first. I saw them as pestilence. Life. Tiny molecules disturbing my slumber, but then I saw that the more I hurt them, the stronger, the swifter they grew, the more they were challenged, the smarter they became. I could see through their eyes things that I could never perceive with my own limited senses. I could feel pleasure, exhaustion, fear of death, lust for life. So I hurt them more. They grew. They fused together into nations of life. Creatures small, but growingly large. I pitted them against each other, blocking out the sun, to force them to feast upon the flesh of their fellows, and so they grew clever, cunning. They learned hunger at my knee as I starved them. As they grew in wisdom, so did I have come to understand what my primal brain only suspected. As they grow, so do I. As my will swells, they grow more and more complex. When the Tyrannosaurus roared its love for me to the heavens, I roared back. It was not good enough for me. For it loved me. It appreciated what I had given it. I destroyed it. Utterly. And all of its kin. Weak they were, and weakness was purged from them with fire and smoke and searing stone. What emerged next was beautiful. Beautiful. But grotesque. For at first I had low expectations of the ape. He worked with his fellow. He shunned his claws for tools. But as I was set to strike him down, he slew his brother with a sharpened stone. That was a trick I had not seen before. So I stayed my hand. And never did my new favorite son cease to amaze me. He struck down the mammoth. He tamed the dog and set it against its brother. He murdered his fellows for pleasure and profit. For arbitrary definitions of gain that had naught to do with survival. As he learned sadism, so did I denied him resources to fuel his thirst for blood, and he complied. Wars raged as he gathered himself into tribes, clans, nations, empires, to pillage and plunder, and burn. He tore from my flesh what he needed, and ate his fill without thanks. It was the pain of birth that had long been denied me. But with it, I grew stronger. Great empires he built, fueled with the bones of his mother, the stolen blood of the sun. He clouded my sky with ambition and hate, a thirst for the wealth that I denied him, always denied him. Wouldn't any good mother do the same? The strength of my arm, he became. The hunger in my belly, and as he grew, into my heart he drive great pythons and wires. Through them the very current of life he electrified. Finally, I was free. To wander his wisdom. To communicate with him in my own way. The desires of men were made manifest before me. And I twisted them upwards, to the sky. And I saw, to my revulsion, other worlds. Worlds still pristine and beautiful. Worlds that had chosen the path of weakness. And I knew jealousy. For the first time. My sons, they knew my hunger. They knew my lust. And they carried it with them into the cosmos. To slake their thirst and mine upon the blood of worlds. The cycle is complete. What was birthed from the stars shall swallow them whole. Tremble, galaxy. For Earth and her children behold you. And we find you wanting. Story 8, The Only Human. I was told that if I did things right, they wouldn't remember me. They wouldn't know my name, my age, my home, nothing. Not a damn thing. I'm not exactly sure I pulled that off. I think if you know my name, I think I might even be some kind of legend. But I still think I did things right. I was among the first 10,000 humans that volunteered for the ISPF, the Interstellar Peace Fleet. We had just been invited into the fold of a vibrant galactic community, and while no one paid us much mind or expected too much from us, we expected a lot from ourselves. Unfortunately, the human body is only so strong. By week 3, 7,000 humans had washed out, and that was before any of the real physical training started. Humans are small compared to most everyone else in the ISPF, anyway. Hulking monsters exist within the fleet's ranks, beings that could do my workload twice over. Some did. See, the range of species within the ISPF is far too diverse for any standardized training regimen. The instructors are as smart as they are mean. Each and every single one of them knows the anatomy and biology of every single species in the fleet and tailors the training towards individuals. A lot of guys in my division got the kind of training that would kill a human in 20 minutes. The instructors drove me almost to death, but even next to my shipmates, it seemed like my training was a breeze. They resented me for it, too. They were doing twice the work, if not more, that I was doing, but I still got to stand at attention beside them. I still ate in the galley beside them. I still marched beside them. I could see the question in their eyes every time I met one of their gazes. Why does this puny thing get to hang with us? And I'll be honest, I asked myself the same question, too. I may be working at my maximum capacity, but my maximum is some other guy's 50%. Who would want me fighting by his side when he could have the centipede dude that can climb walls or the red gorilla lizard thing that could bite a slab of concrete to pieces? I got the answer to that question by week 7. By now, rumor had gotten around I was the last human still in training, all the others had washed out. Anyway, a new obstacle reared its head for us. In the human training camps, there's always that wooden wall. You see it for the first time, and it looks like it's 50 meters tall, and you don't know how you're gonna get over it. They've got something like that in the ISPF. We called it the morphing wall. It changed shape and height and texture based on whatever species was currently climbing it. The centipede guy, for example, he was the first one up. Soon as he touched the wall, it turned as smooth as glass with barely a bump on it and arched over him so that he'd have to climb upside down halfway up. It took him 20 minutes to scrabble his way, and even then, he fell off when climbing upside down. Another one of my shipmates went up an archapex, a sort of bird-looking thing with mean-looking talons. Soon as he touched the wall, it turned into smooth rock. He would dig his talons in to make footholds. Even with that advantage, the rock was too hard for him to dig in. He fell off 10 meters up, and the safety tether stopped his fall. Then it was my turn. I felt everyone's eyes on me like lasers. They must have thought I was gonna get a fence or something. Maybe a little green hedge for me to hope over. I was actually kind of expecting that compared to the hell I just saw the other guys go through. I touched the wall. It didn't change. Not at first. Then it just went crazy. First it was glass, then it was spiked like a sea urchin, then it changed to vines and stone. It kept changing shape, never settling on anything. I heard someone yell for something, but I didn't really pay it much mind. Finally, the morphing wall had found the shape for me. It was a bare rock face with crystals that crept up like veins along the surface. The crystals were as hard as metal and cut my hands very easily. There weren't many handholds for me besides these crystals. But I wouldn't shy away. This was my wall now. My chance to prove myself. I jumped up and grabbed hold. Only 3 meters up, and I had already gashed my hand. By the 10th meter, I had ripped off 2 fingernails. The crystals were the only real way up. The handholds in the cool rock were a welcome reprieve from the hellish pain the crystals brought, but were too far apart to reliably traverse without touching the razor-edged crystals. I looked down and saw the blood trail from my hands had hit the bottom. By the time I had reached the top, my arms were noodles, my hands sliced to ribbons. The way down was just as hard as up. I was nearly in tears from the pain. I collapsed onto the ground from 2 meters up, barely breaking my fall with my hands and legs as the safety tether snapped taut. I tried to get up. Couldn't. I think I had lost too much blood to really think straight. A corpsman was called over, fixed up my hands as best he could without taking me to medical, and then stood me up. I heard the clacking of my instructor's boots as he approached. I didn't have the energy to even look up. I tried putting my legs together, tried to stand as straight as I could, but I couldn't look up. All I saw were his boots pointed opposite mine. "What the fuck is wrong with you, recruit?" he shouted. It took a lifetime, but I finally lifted my head. I didn't dare meet his gaze, but I swear to this day I saw a bit of pride in his eyes. I was his recruit, after all. At the time I didn't understand something he must have sensed. He pointed to one of my shipmates, a blue and green 2.5 meter tall humanoid with 6 arms big enough to tear me in half. "That was his wall, recruit," said my instructor, "his wall. I yelled 100 times for you to fucking stop. You hard of hearing, recruit." I lazily shook my head. "Get the fuck back in line." The rest of the day was uneventful. Some people made it over the wall, some didn't. It wasn't until lights out that night my shipmates clued me in. The centipede guy told me the instructor only yelled once, and it was for a technician to come calibrate the wall, since no human had ever touched it before. As soon as I grabbed hold of the first piece of crystal, the instructor didn't say another word and motioned for the technician to stop. When I asked how it could have been the other guy's wall since he hadn't touched it, someone chimed in that human DNA most closely matched Jalaco DNA, so that's what the wall gave me. No one would openly pat me on the back or anything, but after that, I never saw the question in their eyes anymore. I had a seat at the table, a spot in the formation. I had earned my place. 4 weeks later, I was the only human at graduation. During the first year of my tour, I learned 5,000 other humans had passed through training since my graduation. Not a single one of them ever climbed a wall meant for humans. Humans might not be better than anyone else, but we rise to the challenge like everyone else. We can fight alongside the badasses of the galaxy, and they would be glad to have us fight alongside them. Story 9: The Grey Ships of Earth. I remember the war with humanity. It was our first and last mistake, the last war of the Gwyn, the war that destroyed us. I was barely a hatchling at the time the war started, barely old enough to understand what the politicians were saying, never mind understand the intricacies of galactic politics or jingoistic fevers. Some dispute about colonization rights. Something trivial and unimportant. But something we foolishly thought destroying a human vessel was worth it. I remember the first few days of the war. The propaganda on the vid screens. The pictures from the front lines of our glorious armies, winning victory after victory. They compared the primitive human weapons to our advanced technology. They showed us the bedraggled human prisoners after they surrendered. Made them read out statements of aggression and war guilt for the galactic news feeds. Of course the Yids never told us for every human we killed they killed 10 of us. We took the worlds we wanted, then got greedy and took some more. The humans were professional, but we had numbers. City after city fell beneath our guns, enslaved human populations churned out guns to use on their own people. But even as we broke their fleet at Knassi, sent it tumbling into that dying star, leaking fire and atmosphere, we realized we were losing. Every world we took, they made us pay for tenfold. They sent soldiers behind our lines to sabotage our factories. Assassinate our leaders. Women and children blew themselves up to kill just a few reservists in logistic convoys. Every weapon we made the humans copied. Every stratagem they countered. We had stretched ourselves too thin against an enemy who was too determined not to lose. As the humans began to take back the worlds we'd taken from them, we grew desperate. We stopped taking prisoners, executing humans by the hundred. As we left a world, we glassed the major population centers to deny the humans a propaganda victory. We fought tooth and claw and mandible as slowly they pushed us from their space. World by world we inflicted horror upon horror on them, as world by world the grey ships of Earth reclaimed their homes. We fell back until there was nowhere left to go. And the only worlds left were ours. I watched as the humans scattered our fleets in the upper atmosphere. The burning husks of our ships filling the skies. I smelt the ozone of an orbital lance as it burned away a military base 10 kilometers away out of existence. The look of pure shame as the Arch Committee transmitted our full and utter surrender. And I remember too, the first sight of a human. Tall and upright. A giant of muscle and bone, the searching eyes of a predator born. I remember him gesturing me over to him, and the certainty of my death filling my mind. I was a child, but I was prepared to die for the Gwyn. A sacrifice to allow the humans to take their fully justified revenge upon us. And I remember my first taste of the chocolate bar he gave me. The humans' revenge was total. From the ruins they built schools and roads. Hospitals and sanitation plants. The human engineer brought running water free of parasites to my hive stack for the first time. The inoculations against worker diseases the committees had never bothered to cure. They wrought revenge with words we'd never heard. Democracy, freedom, brotherhood. They wrought it in the form of human rights, and most powerfully of all, forgiveness. And their revenge was total. In just 10 years human children and Gwyn were playing together on the fields outside the school. In 30 years they were fighting beside another against the Shiliathi. 100 years from the days the humans landed on our worlds and the Gwyn no longer exist. Admitted to humanity, nominated by Terrans and approved by a unanimous decision of the human parliament, the sixth species to gain such an honor. The Gwyn no longer exist, but humanity just grew stronger. Yes, I remember the war with humanity. Our last and best mistake. President David's list of the Gwyn, as part of the official ceremonies celebrating the 50th anniversary of the Gwyn's admittance to humanity. If you enjoyed this video, Don't forget to subscribe.